Okay, hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing well, and we have another earphone review here that I'm excited about. I didn't think I was going to be so excited about. This is not going to be one for everybody, but for me, this was, I don't know, this was fun for me. There's not a lot of earphones now that I sit there and I'm like, God, I really like that earphone. This one I really, really like, but it is not going to be for everybody. It's definitely not going to be for everybody. But if you're a fan of J-Rock and J-Pop, and maybe if you want a little explanation of why these earphones do so well for such a specific category of music, I'm going to delve into that in a second. I'm just going to bring up my notes here on the computer because there's a lot to go into, especially about the construction and some of the things I want to talk about, the nonsense in it. BQEYZ. I reviewed the Autumn, I think last year or 2 years ago, and they were quite an innovative company. They came in with this earphone called the Autumn, and it had a really cool sort of interchangeable filter system that was a lot easier than just screwing on and off. And so they piqued my attention that they're actually trying some stuff. That earphone didn't take off for me personally, but I liked the system, I liked the innovation. The Winter that arrived last week, I have not had this in my ears. I've been listening to a lot of the Gimlet, but this thing is, it's just taking me back to something that I'll talk about in a little bit. Anyway, it is a hybrid dynamic driver with a bone conduction driver on the inside as well. So you're getting hybrid construction, two different driver technologies. And that kind of alludes to what this earphone might be used for, because bone conduction, almost a Freudian slip there. Bone conduction comes up with better highs, or I think its best use case is in the highs as a treble focused driver, and then you've got dynamic drivers that can handle the bass well and the mid-range. Luckily the driver on this, the dynamic driver, is actually quite fast and keeps pace, so there's no sort of real disjointed sound going on there. Let's get into the build quality and the overall styling of this, because as I say, I'm excited and you can probably hear it in my voice. Now, the earphone retails under $300 RRP. You might be able to get it cheaper at different places. I'll leave links to the pricing and the ear tips that I'll discuss for you to get for them in the description below. Go ahead, check that out. The box, fairly simple. When this came into the office, I thought this was just going to be a run-of-the-mill, maybe $100, $150 earphone. There's nothing spectacular about the box, although I do like the simplicity and sort of clean aesthetic of it. On the inside, it is just your standard sort of bookshelf presentation style box. But what they do really well, BQEYZ, wish you would change your name, is the accessories. The accessories are well thought out and they're well laid out, and they're decent quality ear tips out of the box, although I still really recommend the ASLess Endofit tips, which are my absolute go-tos. Talk about it in every video. Get them if you're getting a set of earphones over $100. Get those ear tips because it's worth it. They're amazing. And the ear tips, however, that it comes with do have those crazy different borehole sizes. This one is for the reference. That's going to be a slightly wider opening on it. I'll just take out the large version. The large version is very big. I don't think that's going to fit most people, but you can see there that the reference side has a far bigger borehole, and what that's going to do is open up the airiness of it, but it's going to accentuate the treble a little bit more and let it breathe a little bit more while reducing the impact of the bass, obviously, because the sound waves are going to have to travel less through less through a compacted space. I'm going to give up on putting these in a second. There we go, and it's got the nice little holder that comes with it. So that's a cool little addition. In here you get some Comply foam tips just in one size, and then there's a really cheap set of silicone tips that I didn't even bother to show you. The cable on it is really nice. It's nothing spectacular. It's not what I would call a premium cable, but it has really nice qualities. Let's do the twist and drop test and place it down. It doesn't move. Perfect. I absolutely love that. That means it's not going to tangle up and get an absolute pigsty. So you can see it just comes apart. It's got a really nice flow on it. It doesn't have any memory retention. It is a quad braid design going into dual twist after the splitter. Metal splitter on it, of course. Metal 3.5mm jack. Something I'm going to talk about is that these do actually benefit from improving the cable to a balance, not improving the cable, because I think that's all absolute horse manure. But forget that it's a balanced. Forget that it's a more expensive cable, and the reason I'm using it is with balance, to use it with my Thornbury Honey H1. I think it sounds absolutely fantastic with that, and actually using it with the Xperia with the 3.5mm headphone jack. Also, it sounds really, really good just on its own out the 3.5mm, but it does seem to pop a little bit more if it's given a little bit more power from an amplifier. So that's the reason why you can just plug the 3.5 into an amplifier as well. But for me, just at that point, if you're gonna get into amplifiers and stuff, you might want to check out a cable. So yeah, I love the way that that sits. That's so good. The earphones themselves, really, really well made. They are big and chunky, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The first thing I want to talk about is the absolute nonsensical BS marketing. It's not on Chimera levels of hilarity about gods having sex with each other, but this is apparently been redesigned 17 times to effectively recreate an ice rink. Or you just put a little wavy design that even Secret will put on their earphones. But I guess they have to put something in the marketing. Now, it's ergonomic from a standpoint, from if you look at it from this angle, it actually fits really well in the anti-tragus of your ear, and it contours nicely over the top of the flap just above your tragus. The only issue I have is that it's a very deep set earphone. You can see this space is really quite large, and if I take one of the largest earphones just a few years ago, this was considered a beast. This is the original Campfire Audio Solaris. It's not far off of that. So this is what I would consider pushing the limits of size. It's something that's going to protrude just a little bit out the side of your head, and it's not something that's going to be usable for people with small ears. Other than that, I like the aesthetic of it, and the build quality is excellent with all metal. And you'll notice in here that it has the really strange ventilation. That's because of the driver technologies on the inside and that hybrid design that's going to allow the bone conduction, or the bone conduction drivers to operate to their full capacity. Now, the sound on this, and this is where I really want to drum it into people, that this is not going to be one for everybody. Be careful about buying this one, because it's amazing for what it does, and it's to do with geographical location. I'm one of the few people, I think, that actually talks about geographical location, having lived in Asia, having lived in Japan, and lived all over the world. The differences in somebody who really tries to immerse himself in the local music. When I was in Japan many, many years ago, 20 years ago, 20 to 18 years ago, I worked in the music scene in Shinjuku and some of Shibuya, and I got really, really heavily into J-rock, J-pop and stuff like that, but I also got into the really sort of underground electronic music. And that was when I went to, in Akihabara, ugh, I'm pronouncing everything wrong. When I went to the electronics district, and I went into this shop, and it was the first time that I really, I'd had cool headphones before. I had Grados and stuff like that, but it was the first time I walked in, and there was just this wall of Pioneer, Audio-Technica, stuff like that. I'd never seen anything like it. And I started going through the headphones, and they used to allow you to connect your own MP3 player up to it. And I think at that time I even had a mini disc with me. And I was going through one after the other, and I was like, wow, I was like, there's no bass, there's no impact. That's at a time when we in the West were listening to really heavy bass focused music, rap, hip hop, etc., etc. and the pop music was very bassy sounding as well. You know, bass drops were the thing. And coming to that culture in Japan, I was listening to headphones. I was like, they're just not giving the same impact that I'm used to on the low end. And it was at that point that I got talking to the guy in the shop, a really nice guy that spoke English. And he was like, here, borrow my MP3 player. And he had a playlist of his top 15 songs. And that was the time I got introduced to Deer and Grey. Deer and Grey, absolutely spectacular. I ended up going to concerts and stuff. It was, they were bonkers outfit, and yeah, one of my friends really got me heavily into it, showed me the videos and stuff, and it was like screaming. It was more high focused, less bass focused, and that's when I became aware of the whole Asian marketplace. People in the West, a lot of the headfires and stuff like that, usually deride stuff for having no bass or poor bass, although I think that the stigmatism from that is being overturned now by more educated people, and the greater prominence in people speaking English and communicating across different cultures, and as well as the internet bringing people, you know, I used to have to buy CDs of this type of music. It wasn't like it was easily available and that I could know the kanji and type it into LimeWire and download one song at a time. So I had to bring all my CD collection at the time. Now people have access to everything, YouTube and Spotify, etc., etc. You have access to that type of music, and people are becoming more aware that certain earphones, even though they might be light on bass, are very well tuned towards the East Asian market, and that is what I'm going to talk about here. Sorry for that long rant. I'm going to timestamp this so that you can jump forward and maybe skip that if it wasn't something you were here for, but I just thought it was interesting to talk about. And if any of you guys have experience as well with that sort of multicultural, when you were introduced to a different type of music and it maybe changed the way that you listen to headphones, please let me know. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Let me know down in the comments. It would be interesting to have a little bit of a discussion about that. This earphone, to me, took me back to listening to the Asian music and even more recent stuff. Like I was listening to, and I'll give you a little rundown of a playlist that I've put aside. So if you want to listen to 5 different songs, try Dried Flower by Yuri, Nanan by Case Fuji, Raison d'etre by Eve, My First Story, Missing You, and One OK Rock, the beginning, and then go on to just listen to pretty much anything by One OK Rock. They were really, really good. And if you want to see what I'm talking about with Deer and Grey, go and listen to Deer and Grey, the final. The guy's voice is insane. Like, he's one of the best screamers on the planet. In fact, he tore his vocal cords, a whole bunch of stuff went down. He can't perform to the same level. Now, the way that this presents the music is exactly perfect for those genres. It's one of the best manifestations that I've seen of that under $300. Realistically, you're going to need to get lucky with a low bass focus, and by low bass I don't mean neutral. I mean it's quite low and recessed in the sub bass department. It's a more fast, clean, punchy sounding bass. It's a crisper sounding bass presented with the Winter. Going into the mid bass, it's very detailed and very technically perfect, but it's not texturally developed. Going into the mid range, it's going to sound a lot cleaner than you're perhaps used to, with an extension in the upper mid range, but there's going to be tons of imaging, tons of separation, tons of clarity. Everything is going to sound technically perfect. It's going to sound very crisp and crystalline sounding, which is what you want to hear from that sort of music. You want the air, you want the separation, you want the clarity and the drive from that. And again, extending into the treble. The treble is pushed, but it is not hot. People might mistake this for being a treble heavy earphone, or it's not sibilant. It's definitely not sibilant, but some people who are not used to hearing that sort of treble might be treble sensitive. There's a difference between treble sensitivity, because it's something you're not used to and you can adapt to, as opposed to an earphone that is just really overly pushed into the point of it's just sibilant. These are not sibilant by any means, but if you're somebody that doesn't listen to more treble focused music, you're going to have to take a little bit of time to adapt it and familiarize yourself with the music. Maybe try the playlist I listen to. I listed above, although that's not the most treble sensitive of areas. But for example, anything with hi-hats or snares, that sort of thing, piccolo is not going to develop a hotness that is uncomfortable. It's just that you might not have a developed enough a palate in your ears to appreciate it yet, but it's something you can learn and something well worth learning if you want to go on the audio journey of expanding the type of music you can listen to and get enjoyment from different types of genres. I'm sorry guys, I'm getting really overly passionate and this is going to be another 20-minute video, but for me this was nostalgic. It performed well in a genre of music that I don't really listen to all that often anymore, but if it's that predominance of your listening comes from those sort of types of music, this is going to be absolutely nail on the head. Just as somebody who listens to just pure rock, just somebody that listens to pure acoustic, somebody that listens to pure for example, rap, hip hop and stuff like that, and you become adapted to that music, you'll become adapted to J-pop and J-rock with this. Additionally, it does really, really well with Polyphia, Tim Henson and Scotty LePage's guitar band. Very little in the terms of vocals and not much in the terms of bass, but listening to Ego Death on this, very airy, very open and very crystalline and precise, with some of the notes that Tim Henson was playing there. And some of his bends, not boomer bends, obviously. That sounded fantastic, and yeah, it's a really, really special earphone for the right scenario and the right person. And if you're lucky enough to have this in your collection for specifically that purpose and you can afford it, I definitely recommend it. For everything else, there's other recommendations I have on the channel, and I'll maybe do some comparisons in the future with this. Let me know if you're going to be interested in that sort of thing, and comparisons in maybe my top 3 earphones for different genres would be a cool video at different price points. Maybe sub 100, sub 500, sub 1000. That would be cool. I've got an absolute ton of earphones that I can just keep digging from, and I'm sure I can come up with something that you really, really like. So thanks for sticking with me, guys. I actually really like doing these type of videos where I get impassioned about something again, because it's not often, because earphones are at such a good standard. But yeah, the Winter caught me by surprise. Not for everyone, but for me, for that case, it's going to stick around my collection for a while. Thanks very much for watching. See you on the next video.